This is CBC Vancouver News.
I'm not sure that that is going to lessen applicants from wanting or needing to flagpole.
The federal government has moved to restrict flagpolling hours at some BC ports of entries after growing pushback from both sides of the border. And Sikhs from across BC gathered at the Vancouver Art Gallery to mark the 40th anniversary of the invasion of the Golden Temple in India. Plus,
important to check behind the ears and under the collar, under the arms, all the places that ticks like to hang out.
tick season is off to an early start. We get some tips and tricks to help protect your pets. Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Flagpolling, the practice of leaving Canada and re-entering immediately after to receive same-day immigration services, may be more difficult after this week. The federal government has moved to restrict flagpolling hours at 12 ports of entries in Canada, including 5 here in BC. And while flagpolling is completely legal, as Shaurya Chetri reports, the shortcut is facing growing pushback from both sides of the border.
Here in Surrey, the Peace Arch border is one of the busiest border crossing between US and Canada. It is also one of the most popular options for temporary residents to renew their status via flagpolling. Here's how the process works. You travel across the border, whether it be for a minute, an hour, or several days, depending on your status. Then you travel back north to Canada Border Services Agency, where they review your documents and can provide you with a new residency status, such as a renewed study permit or work permit, extend your temporary residence status, or confirm your permanent residence, turning what can be months-long process into a very short one. Despite some time savings, there are some risks associated. The Canada Border Services Agency says that people who apply via flagpolling may not be able to re-enter Canada, and this also applies to people with maintained status. The agency says it discourages flagpolling, and as of May 30, it has limited hours of flagpolling services at 12 ports of entry in BC, Ontario, and Quebec. The CBSA says the limitation introduced is to enable frontline officers to efficiently process large volume of travelers in peak periods and to focus on other key priorities. But one immigration consultant says that's not going to be of much help.
I'm not sure that that would be the cure. I'm not sure that that is going to lessen applicants from wanting or needing to flagpole.
Although a risky endeavor, Lee says flagpolling is necessary in certain situations.
The example of that could be that a company can't wait the 60 to 90 days for IRCC to process the application in order for the worker to start working. And so that's the usefulness of it, and that's the reason why people do it.
In a statement to CBC, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada says there are policies in place that let workers get authorization quickly to start working for a new employer rather than waiting. Earlier this week, U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called on Canada to stop permitting flagpolling, saying the process is putting pressure on U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
By increasing traffic and wait time here at the border, hampering smooth commerce between our nations, hampering tourism.
But a Washington-based immigration lawyer says otherwise.
I don't see it as a problem. I've never heard an immigration officer on the American side complain about it or comment.
Flagpolling has gone on for years as a backlog of online and paper applications have created lengthy wait times for some. However, as immigration experts say, it's a process to approach with caution and extra preparation. Shaurya Chetri, CBC News, Surrey.
Close to 100 Sikhs from across BC gathered at the Vancouver Art Gallery tonight to mark the 40th anniversary of the invasion of the Golden Temple in India.
You know, it's really important to gather here because Indian interference continues to today.
He says in June 1984, the Indian Army stormed Sikhism's holiest shrine in Amritsar to root out extremists working toward an independent homeland called Khalistan. It triggered a chain of events. In October that year, the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi by her Sikh bodyguards sparked large-scale violence against Sikhs. It's estimated that more than 3,000 Sikh lives were lost in the attacks.
People need to be informed about the ongoing oppression by the Indian state and how the Sikh community and other communities should rally together to stand for freedom, for equality, and stand against the injustice of the Indian state.
Commercial dump trucks in BC are now required to have in-cab warning devices. The move hopes to curb infrastructure crashes such as overpass strikes. Under the new rule, all dump trucks of a certain height operating in BC are now required to have warning devices installed in the cab to alert drivers when the dump box is raised. Drivers could face a $598 fine if caught without a warning device. This is the latest crackdown from the province amid a wave of commercial vehicles crashing into overpasses and bridges in BC. And earlier today, a commercial vehicle struck a rail overhead in Prince George near the Foothills Boulevard. The Ministry of Transportation says the incident did not impact provincial infrastructure. The ministry's commercial vehicle safety and enforcement is now investigating. More than 500 workers have walked off the job at the Gilbrotter copper mine in central BC, about 2 hours south of Prince George. Unifor Local 3018 says contract negotiations began in February and have involved many hours of meetings, but there was still no agreement on Friday when the workers' contract expired. The union says members voted to strike against Vancouver-based Taseko Mines after the company had refused to negotiate basic terms of a new collective agreement. Gibraltar is the second largest open-pit copper mine in Canada. Taseko Mines says it has suspended mining operations at the site and that it remains committed to the bargaining process. Starting today, BC's lowest paid workers will be earning a little more. The minimum wage has now increased to $17.40 an hour, the highest in any province. Liam Britton has more on the fight for a living wage and from business owners worried about fronting those costs.
Sarah Borden-Jorgensen works for minimum wage at a restaurant in Yaletown. Her tips go a long way to help her and her partner get by, but they're hard to count on.
It makes it very difficult when you're trying to save for the future, especially if you have to take some time off work, you don't get paid time off.
Sarah is one of hundreds of thousands of workers in BC who will get a raise June 1st. The minimum wage will rise from $16.75 an hour to $17.40, 65 cents more.
Even though it's going to be a bit higher, the wage, I don't see it allowing a lot of people to make ends meet.
Only Nunavut and the Yukon pay more per hour in Canada.
And that's really good news for the workers who depend on it.
But Anastasia French says with affordability in mind, BC's minimum wage is far from a living wage.
1 in 3 workers in BC are not earning enough money to be able to pay for basic essentials like food and rent.
The living wage, as calculated by Living Wage for Families BC and the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, is what 2 working parents each would need to bring in per hour to buy basics like food, clothing, housing, and transport for a family of 4 in their community. Dawson Creek has BC's lowest living wage at $20.64 an hour. The highest is in Clayoquot Sound, $26.51. For major urban centres, Metro Vancouver is pegged at $25.68. The Fraser Valley at $20.66. Greater Victoria is at $25.40, Kelowna at $24.60, and Prince George at $22.09. Now, Living Wage for Families and the CCPA have released a report that finds 740,000 workers in BC, 32% of the workforce, don't make their community's living wage. Workers like 58-year-old Grim Culhane He is a person with disabilities who cleans Vancouver's streets.
It affects your mental health, just knowing that you can afford to live. Having to scrape from paycheck to paycheck is very difficult.
French wants the province to take more action on affordability and set the minimum wage to $20 an hour. But the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses claims that would make tens of thousands of BC businesses unprofitable. Apparel store owner Jeff Martin pays more than minimum, but agrees wage increases step on bottom lines.
The margins keep getting lower and lower and lower. So, this is just another thing that takes a little bite out of your already thin profit margin.
But he also agrees his staff need to deal with the high cost of living.
They're loyal, so I want to be loyal to them. Quite often it just means I pay myself a little less.
The province's Labour Ministry says the government has cut costs for childcare, electricity, and car insurance, capped rental increases, and is addressing food insecurity. It's also committing to more minimum wage hikes tied to inflation in future years. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's official opposition leader was campaigning in Cranbrook today while touring the region with a local MLA. As Corey Bullock reports, the political leaders announced a multi-million-dollar fish and wildlife plan and did some damage control on the loss of BC United's caucus chair.
BC's official opposition is hopeful that a new fish and wildlife management plan will come into play if the party wins the election this fall. BC United leader Kevin Falcon and MLA Tom Chapitka were in Cranbrook today to make the announcement.
This is the gold standard for conservation.
The party promises to establish an independent funding model to protect BC's natural assets. It would see every dollar from hunting and angling licenses reinvested directly into fish and wildlife habitats, all managed by a new agency that includes title and stakeholders, something Chapitka has been advocating for years.
They always think that what's best in Victoria is good for rural British Columbia. That's not true. And with this initiative, we can bring those stakeholders together. We can get it done. There's no problem.
The party cited chronic wasting disease as a major issue to be addressed through the plan. The disease was detected for the first time in BC in an area near Cranbrook in January. It affects cervids like deer and elk and can be likened to mad cow disease. Since January, the province has implemented mandatory testing measures and limited transport of deer carcasses. But Falcon and Chapitka argue more can be done.
So we need that further data collection on that. That's what this money will help with. And we need those testing stations to be closer to Cranbrook.
The promise comes on the heels of recent pressure for the party, as BC United caucus chair Lauren Dirksen announced this week he would cross the floor to the increasingly popular Conservative Party of BC.
To have somebody that we've heard internally talk about how appalled he is by the BC Conservatives' positions, especially on social conservative issues, to then walk over and join that party is obviously disappointing, but he'll have to defend that to his constituents in his community.
Dirksen leaving came after merger talks between the two right-of-centre parties broke down, and hopes of a deal to avoid vote splitting in the fall election were dashed. But that doesn't seem to have fazed the opposition leader.
I really believe, I trust British Columbians. British Columbians are good people, they're hardworking, they're honest, they're not paying attention, frankly, 5 months out from an election, but they will.
Falcon and Chapitka say they want to work together to unite British Columbians as campaigning begins for the October election. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
Experts say tick season is off to an early start in BC and in more urban settings, not just forested areas. It comes with a warning from experts to be cautious when exploring the outdoors, especially with your pet. As Michelle Morton reports, the unusually warm weather is allowing the dangerous bugs to survive longer.
He's set up in style today. Okay, plop him in there.
This Vancouver veterinarian is getting ready for tick season.
And certainly in the spring, we tend to see a few more ticks on dogs primarily.
And it could be a busy one, thanks to BC's warmer spring weather.
Ticks can become active as soon as there's no snow on the ground and about 4 degrees Celsius. What we saw this year was activity that started earlier than usual.
Savage is an entomology professor who also created the citizen science website eTick, where she asks people to upload pictures of ticks they find across the country.
We saw more of a constant trickling of submissions beginning right, I believe, at the end of February. So for a comparable period of time, March and April this year were rather busy compared to previous years.
Dr. Burston says it's important to check your pets for those little black bugs after spending time outdoors.
Important to check behind the ears and under the collar, under the arms, all the places that ticks like to hang out, and to get them removed as soon as you find them.
He says that's because the longer the tick is attached to your pet, the higher the risk is of disease transmission.
Certainly they can attach to pets as well as humans, but the big concern is that they can transmit certain blood-borne parasites. The one that people are most worried about is Lyme disease, and that's one that's probably most prevalent in British Columbia.
The BC Centre for Disease Control says less than 1% of ticks tested in this province carry the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. If you are bitten by a tick, one infectious disease expert says you can get Lyme prophylaxis, but it needs to be within 72 hours of the bite.
It will significantly reduce the risk of developing Lyme if that tick had Lyme. Helpful, yes. Perfect, no.
Dr. Burston says there are ways to protect your pets against ticks before you head outside and recommends contacting your local veterinarian to learn more about the medications available. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, it could be a very soggy Sunday for people living on BC's south coast. A special weather statement has been issued for parts of the province with rainfall totals of up to 50 millimeters expected in some areas. The hardest hit regions will be the North Shore, northern sections of the Fraser Valley, and Howe Sound. Environment Canada says the rain is set to last all day Sunday, intensifying in the afternoon, but should ease off Monday. The agency is warning of possible localized flooding in low-lying areas and water pooling on roads. All right, it is time now to take a look at our forecast. Let's begin with a quick peek at the temperatures around the province tonight. And moving into tomorrow, we can see that precipitation sticking around for much of tomorrow as well. 20 degrees in Fort St. John is your high for tomorrow with a chance of thunderstorms. 17 in Kamloops. On the island, Victoria, a high of 13 for tomorrow, similar in Tofino with a high of 12, and Cranbrook is going to be at a high of 17 for tomorrow. Moving into our 5-day forecast here in Metro Vancouver, as we mentioned, it is going to be a very soggy Sunday, so 14 degrees is our high for tomorrow. That rain is going to stick around for both Monday with a high of 14 and staying the same for Tuesday with a high of 14. But it looks like that is going to clear right up for Wednesday, and those temperatures are going to rise to a high of 19 for Wednesday. It's the first of its kind in Canada. Commercial real estate owners in Vancouver are being told to cut their buildings' emissions or face fines. More on that story after the break. Here in Vancouver, commercial real estate owners are being told to cut their emissions or else face hefty fines. It's a new city bylaw that's the first of its kind in Canada and targets large retail and office buildings. Owners have to start tracking and submitting their emissions starting today. And as Tanya Fletcher reports, while many are on board with the retrofits needed, they say it won't come easy.
And as we kind of move over here, you'll see a lot more of that piping that we saw.
Jesse Gregson shows us a narrow mechanical room filled with pipes all connecting a new heat recovery system. His real estate company is upgrading 2 buildings to meet Vancouver's new bylaw, including the biggest mall in the city.
In this building particularly, we're targeting a 50% steam reduction, which equates to almost 50% reduction in emissions for the building.
In Vancouver, more than half of all carbon pollution vents from buildings. The cap on emissions will now apply to roughly 200 buildings citywide, and owners who don't comply will face hefty fines. The bylaw was inspired by similar measures in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C.
With the right structures, we see lots of progress being made in 3-year timeframes.
Schneider Electric is a global company that helps with decarbonization. They look at the energy footprint of a building to calculate exactly which retrofits are needed.
The technologies exist, the business models exist, the financing exists to get probably 70% of a good transition done relatively quickly.
The city says roughly 1 in 4 buildings covered by the new bylaw currently exceed the emissions limits, with fines typically ranging from $10,000 to $30,000. But those building owners have a grace period until 2026 before those penalties kick in.
One thing we heard loud and clear is that, real estate owners need help to get this work done. If you're a bigger player.
BC's Industry Association says while the timelines are feasible, it's the cost that can be a big challenge.
So a building owner might look at that and go, well, wow, this building is not worth as much as it was 5 years ago. I'm going to have to spend a significant sum of money to make it comply with these regulations. Maybe it makes more sense for me to redevelop this building and tear it down.
Ultimately, Vancouver's goal is to cut big building emissions in half by 2030 and altogether by 2040. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here we have a live shot of Georgia Viaduct in BC Place all lit up. After the break, why free music concerts are taking over Vancouver.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond. Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
The Vancouver Symphony Orchestra brought 12 hours of free concerts to the city for its 5th annual Day of Music. The types of music featured included opera, drumming, and flamenco. Take a listen.
Just come and enjoy music, and there are no rules or protocols. It's open, and it's going to be an experience, and you're allowed to come in whenever you like, and you're also allowed to leave whenever you like. So I think it's to enjoy and love music. That's what it's all about.
We have many stages, mostly around downtown, but also at the airport, and just providing free concerts. There's like 100 concerts all in one day, basically building community and playing many different kinds of music.
The very exciting thing about this is that it's actually not curated by the Vancouver Symphony. There is an open call for anyone who would like to be a part of it to bring their ensemble. This is about, hey, Vancouver, you have Lower Mainland, you have this amazing ensemble here, but we are also a musical town.
Exactly.
And these are all the people that make music in this town, and we're all on the same team. And you can come and hear it.
That is your late news for this Saturday, June 1st. For news at any hour, head to our website at cbc.ca. Have a great night.